Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. I am here in Scottsdale, Arizona with my friend, the glassing guru, Cody Nelson of GoHunt.com, the optics authority. Cody, how you doing? It's going to be fun to do a podcast here in person.
Yeah, we're doing a little live podcast, I guess, if you want to call it. As live as they can be anyway. Doing well, working.
Selling a lot?
The season was really good over the Black Friday sales and Thanksgiving time, and things are ramping up and looking really good for the Christmas holiday.
So, Cody, from your perspective on a day-to-day basis, basically in business hours, every single day you are answering customers' questions. You're helping people place different optics, rifle scopes, spotting scopes, whatever in their arsenal for them to use for hunting.
Absolutely.
So, would it be safe to say that, you're on the phone basically from, sun up to sundown from business hours?
Typically speaking.
Yeah.
I try to follow the Go Hunt hours, which if anybody doesn't know, I'm working out of my home in Scottsdale, and so there's an hour time change, but I follow, my 9 to 5, but my 9 to 5 is earlier, and so I end up staying late. So typically speaking, I'm on the phone anywhere between 10 and 12 hours a day.
And not only the phone, we've talked about how people can get a hold of you, but obviously you are fielding the emails as well.
Oh yeah,
and optics at GoHunt.com and Cody at GoHunt.com, both. So I'm sure there's a happy medium of being able to talk to customers and answer emails. So you're a busy guy.
It tends to be that way. Yeah, which is good though. It's business is business, and that's, I think, what sets us apart. From a lot of other people out there is that we're trying to give the best and most informative information that we can, and do it in person, and truly understand what the needs and what that actual buyer is needing. It's not about what I want. It's not about what, sometimes it's not about what they want. Sometimes what they want ends up being something totally different once we start talking about it.
Right.
And so the only way to really get to that from people is to truly understand their needs and wants.
I know the listeners get so much value out of being able to ask their questions. And I know the last podcast episode that we did where it was a question and answer, we got a lot of great feedback from that. So I put it out on my Instagram handle to ask questions, that we were going to do a podcast, and we got a bunch of questions in, so we might as well dive into them. We've got a question here from Hunt 'em Up. It is, what is the best tripod and fluid head combo for the ATX? I'm assuming ATX 65, so he's talking about a Swarovski 65. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about a fluid head combo, so I assume he's talking about a pan head. Yeah. He's talking about a tripod. I think we talked in the last podcast episode where it's my opinion that the pistol grip heads that are out there on the market, there's several of them out there on the market, are great for a certain application, but in my opinion, from a precise technical glassing standpoint for some of the animals like Coues deer, desert sheep, maybe mule deer, some long range, type picking it apart glassing. Those pistol grip heads are a little herky jerky in my opinion, and good hand head.
They don't typically handle the weight, because when you squeeze the handle of a pistol grip, the weight of that optic is now in your hands, and your hand, by the way, is resting and balancing on a ball. Right. So your hand becomes a steadying factor, and that's yes, there is a point and a time and a place that I think pistol grips work, and you'll hear the term power glassing, and where guys are just they're popping at one spot and looking at 4 or 5 different spots in succession, and then going back over those again. So I think when you start putting heavier optics on, it doesn't matter how you say it, do it. It's not as smooth,
right,
as if you're using a true pan head,
right,
or fluid head.
So
the most important part of that question is that like, if he wants to reach out to me and ask, what I want to ask him is that when people say that they want to, what's the best combo? Well, I'm always typically leaning towards a little bit like medium weight to heavier weight on my setups, because typically I want the stability and the sturdiness and the quality of what I'm looking through. Less vibration. So, and typically the only way you can combat that is weight and, in strength of the tripod, and then obviously how smooth the head is and its ability to handle weight. So if he's a backpacker, his needs and wants may be different than a guy that, is the truck hunting, or he's day hunting, or he's walking, a quarter mile. It doesn't matter. But I would want to know what his needs are, or what he's using it for.
Right.
Because, you could go with the Outdoorsman's Panhead, you could go with the 700 RC2, and those are going to be, on your lighter weight to where you actually have some good results. But if he's, digiscoping, phone scoping, or, trying to get good quality, recordings or pictures, I'm going to go to a Ciru VA5, or, the X Pro, or, Jay, you use the 128 RCs. So I'm going to go to something heavier and that's technically smoother.
Yeah. So, I mean, that brings up a point, or you've already made the point that, you have to kind of know what the application is. So it's a little bit of a loaded question. What is the best tripod setup and fluid head for a Swarovski 65? The interesting thing is the Swarovski ATX 65 is on the lightweight end of those Swarovski modular spotting scope systems. Correct. Where you could have the 85 or the 95, which is considerably heavier. I would say that, in my opinion, over the years, like you're talking about having a little bit heavier tripod, a little bit heavier tripod head, it's all about stability. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you get any wind, you get any vibration at all. If you're going super lightweight, typically if you're going to be glassing a pretty long distance, you're going to miss a lot of stuff because your binos are going to have, a little bit of vibration to them.
No, absolutely.
And, a perfect example is this last hunt I just got off, this desert bighorn sheep hunt in western Arizona. Tyler Hall was using a Jim White panhead, mm-hmm. which is a real lightweight panhead.
Right.
One of the things that I've never liked about that particular head is the fact that when you get to the target that you want, and you want it to kind of lock in, so to speak, you have to twist.
Exactly.
And he called me over. He's like, you wouldn't believe it. He said, I had my 15s up, and he said, I didn't have it twisted down. And he said, it flopped forward.
Yep.
And the whole thing went down, and it fell on the objective. He said, perfect, fell perfectly down, scratched him up on the objective. And, on a heavier tripod, on a heavier head, right, that just doesn't tend to happen. But when you go lightweight, obviously you're saving weight, right, but there's a trade-off. I would say, like you, always lean a little bit heavier probably than what, if you're going to go heavy on anything, go heavy on the tripod head.
Exactly.
And probably a little bit thicker legs.
Yep. Yeah, you can lighten up on the legs a little bit, and, but to me it comes back to that smoothness of the actual head, and something that, maybe people aren't thinking of in this too, is that make sure that your head has a way to help balance the optic. Because if you'll look at the modular 65s, 85s, and 95s, the feet are actually turned different way on them. So, one of the things that will help combat how steady you are is how well that the optics is balanced on that head. So I like a head that also has plates that you can move back and forth. Swarovski now has the Arca Swiss feet that will slide into an Arca Swiss compatible head that you can also move back and forth within, however long the throw is on that particular plate. So I think to have them balanced is important. and will help steady that even
for
more.
the situation where Tyler had it top heavy, basically front end heavy, and it fell over, you could have it balanced
exactly.
back.
And look, Jim White, God rest his soul, he was a great guy, and I loved his ingenuity and the head that he came up with, and that was my only complaint about that ever was, and Jim actually addressed it at one point because he made the threads on that handle so that they were a little bit, you could feather in the weight a little better.
So a little tension.
Exactly. So I'm not sure which one, Tyler was using, but it very well could be in older style, and it just, it is what it is. But
without knowing all the answers, best tripod, fluid head combo, what would you say?
I've been real partial to the VA5 head, which we've talked about before. It's an Arco-Swiss compatible. You've got a lot of room on top of the head to move it back and forth and balance your optics. It's butter smooth in the pan and the tilt. It's got a lot of room to feather in the weight of the optic. So I've been really leaning towards that head lately. If somebody wanted to go towards the other end of the spectrum and go a little bit lighter weight, with not maybe as much control, the 700 RC2 from Manfrotto works real well. Certainly we've talked about the slick tripods, and I know you're a big fan of the 733, 734s. I know we're going to talk about this later because there's been some changes, but the 733 and the 634 slicks I've been liking a lot lately. Some of the carbon fiber, like the 290 Extra, excellent model. Lightweight, so midweight, not super lightweight, but midweight, 3-pounders.
While we're on that subject, do you like the twists or do you like the flip locks?
I for years, when Manfrotto first came out and they were called Bogan, and they're not called Bogan anymore, it's Manfrotto, and they had the old, like lever style, like twist locks, and those used to get worn out, and then they came out with the flip locks, and I've used flip locks pretty much for about the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, somewhere in between there. I like flip locks, but the truth is that I've been leaning towards twist locks lately, only because I think they're easier to keep cleaner. Mm-hmm. I think
they're quieter.
They're quieter. When you go to twist on them, it doesn't take like a full twist to let them out. You can just feather it in, and so most of the tripods that we've been carrying are twist locks. The flip locks take a little bit more maintenance. You need to clean them. You need to keep them dust free, because anytime that you get dirt and grime in there, they can really start hanging up. And I'm not trying to knock them. I'm just saying, keep them clean. And if there's one thing that'll, scare a buck out of there, is, you go to crank down on it, and you hear that rickety door, shutting. That's
when you get the evil eye from me looking back.
No, that's the 300-yard rule right there, baby.
Yeah. Let's jump to the next question. DJ Branford says, Zeiss Victory HT range-finding binos, 10x42s or 10x54s. I haven't looked through the 10x54s myself.
Ridiculously bright.
Really?
They're
brighter than the 42s?
Oh, yeah. It's... I would just, it's a hard choice to tell somebody, but here's what I would say to somebody. If they were going to use that piece of glass primarily, off a tripod, and we've all talked about tripods binoculars on a tripod should be 85% of the time.
Right.
I would almost always lean towards the bigger piece of glass, because you've got
your stability of the tripod.
You've got your stability. You've got a bigger tripod. You've got heavier glass, and a 10 power mounted on a tripod. That's over a 5mm exit pupil. That's a pretty bright piece of glass and super clear. the glass on those things is ridiculously good. It's that, it's their new shot glass, and holy buckets, is it awesome.
Let's go back to something you said there. You talk about brightness, and you talk about glassing with 10 power binoculars, and obviously the guys here that hunt Arizona for goose deer and what have you, a lot of the real detailed glassing and such love the 15s or the 12s. Mm-hmm. But there's still something about having a good pair of 10 power binoculars that are bright, that you're catching lots of movement out of the corners of your eyes, having that wide field of view. We get questions a lot, 10s or 15s, and it's kind of, a lot of it depends, like we talked before, on what you're hunting primarily.
Yeah, like how far, how big is the canyon you're in? I mean,
but I wouldn't discount having a good pair of 10s stabilized and being able to, have a pair of 10s that you catch that bright, you've got that vivid, you've got good image, and you've got a wide field of view because you're catching most everything that's going to move around.
When you take a pair of, 10 by 50s, 1054s, super bright, Swarovski has most people don't even know that Swarovski has an 856 anymore and a 1056, but, they are technically available, on a on a limited order basis, and they can be had. But I mean, those glasses, those are 5.6, 5.4 millimeter exit pupils, which is basically the measurement or the width, the band of light touching your eye.
To explain that a little bit more, go into exit pupil and why.
So to get your exit pupil measurement, you divide the objective number, the higher number, by the power. So if you're a 56 divided by 8, you have a 7 millimeter exit pupil. I mean, talk about being super bright and being able to see stuff at really, really low light conditions. If anybody's ever glassed through an 8 power and actually sat there as the sun comes down and deer start to stand up, it's like a beacon of light. I mean, it's hard to explain, but when deer are in that first, bright light, they stand out like sore thumbs, especially the brighter the glass.
Sure.
And so I would just, like most people realize that, okay, so you got a 1042 binocular. So, that would be a 4.2 max exit pupil. So I think that's typically the standard that you try to look for in a binocular. You want like a 4 millimeter exit pupil. And if anybody's wondering, like when your eyes dilated and you've got, those measurements start to make sense, of why you need, at real low light, why you need more light to your eye, because your eyes are super dilated and they're looking for light, as opposed to, when it's super bright out, your eyes your pupils are, not so dilated. And so there's a whole combination there of why that works.
So back to the question, sounds like you like the 10 by 54s.
For my situation, I would probably use 1054s because I know that I'm going to have them mounted on a tripod a lot, and they're not overly big to where if I had to wear them on my chest, they're not obnoxious. So yes, I would choose 1054s, but I mean, either way, you're getting one of the best.
We got a question here from Wade_R3. He says, upgrading to 10 by 42 Swaro EO range. Let me see, 10 by 42 Swaro EO range finder or Leica Geovid rangefinder opinions.
Well, and this is an exact question of why you want to talk to somebody, because when he says Geovids, does he mean like the old body style Geovid R's, which is they've basically they're not HD glass, but they do have the ranging that you can range from 10 to 800 with an angle, and I mean they're a good piece of glass, but they're just not their best piece of glass. So, or is he talking about the Geovid HDR or the Geovid HDB? So,
what's the difference?
Well, the HDBs have the ability to put an SD card and take your rifle ballistics. Well, I think you can take up to 6 rifle calculate or sets and have them for different loads or
Okay.
different situations. But you can put that in an SD card and load it. It loads in. You take the battery out and it loads in there, and then you put the battery back in. And then the HDR does not have the SD card capability. It basically, it works off the rifleman's rule, but that piece of glass, it's still the same body style, which is they're kind of bent sort of. They're kind of a quasi roof prism, poro prism, kind of a hybrid. Super bright glass, really good glass, but it's not like the older original, Geovid body style. So they actually have 3 different models.
Gotcha. And then the Swaro 10x42.
Yeah, Swaro, you've got the 1042s and the 842s. And the difference we get asked all the time is about the glass in the Swaros. Like I use the 842s and I think they're really, really bright. The 1042s are, again, they're really bright. I get asked all the time, are they the same glass that's in the Swaro Vision, regular 1042 ELs? And no, they're not. There is a slight difference.
You lose a little bit of light transmission.
Just a touch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, when you get to this quality of glass, I mean, you're starting to kind of split hairs a little bit. But I've never once looked through. I've used the 10s on a number of trips, and I've used the 8s, and I've never once looked at them and thought, wow, man, I can't see that because it's not bright enough.
What about the buttons on the Leica and the buttons on the Swarovski?
So
as far as which side are they on and response time and such, have you tested those?
Yeah, typically speaking, it's kind of I don't want to say it's a buzzword now. It's not a buzzword. It's actual real. The response times have been getting better and better. It used to be that the Zeiss RFs were the fastest of any of them. I would tell you that I think that playing field has been kind of leveled.
The margin's tight.
The margin's much tighter than it used to be. I would tell you that the Swarovski, the button is on your left hand side. The Geovid HDRs and HDBs, it's on the right hand side. So you've got a lot of different options to go over on which one is right for you. And again, like this is a perfect example of, look, if you want to break these down and go through them with me, call me, and I'll walk you through each one of them.
What are you primarily hunting? Are you an archer? Are you a rifle hunter? What type of animals are you hunting?
The Swarovski ELs, I get the question all the time that they don't range down below 30 yards. So some of the archers are like, whoa, I don't want to do that. Some guys don't care about that because they know where to put it if it's below 30. They're they might hold just slightly lower, but I don't know.
If you're worried whether it's 18 yards or 26 yards, you have a problem, in my opinion. But a lot of people would argue with me.
But no,
a lot of people would argue with me.
My good buddy Chris Webster would argue with me. I know that for sure. And he's laughing at me right now, too. But, I think that, having only killed elk under 20 yards, I've never had that issue or that problem. It was just I picked a spot and I've been using a 30-yard pin for a while now. So
let's jump to the other
sure.
question. Riley Utovic 1 says, better filming quality with phone scope off your optics, binos, or spotting scope. So I had I've been using the phone scope adapter. Obviously, they're a sponsor of my podcast here, and I've been using the adapter for quite a while. And one thing that's interesting is when you're filming something at fairly close range with your binocular, you can get some unreal, digiscoping or phone scope image. One thing that I learned is I didn't realize on these iPhones, and I would assume on other phones, that you can actually go into your settings. So on my iPhone X, you go into the video settings, and you can actually, and I'll actually do it so I can tell the listeners here. Let me click on it. So you go down here to look for camera, and then go to, it says record video, and you can actually do 720p HD at 30 feet per second, 1080 HD at 30, 1080 HD at 60, 4K at 24, 4K at 30, 4K at 60. And down below that, actually, I'm reading right off the iPhone, it says a minute of video will be approximately 40 MBs with the 720, and that's a space saver. A minute of video on the 1080 is 60 MBs, and that's the default setting, so it's automatically set at 1080 at 30 feet per second, or it must be frames per second, I'm sorry. And then 90 MBs with the 1080 at 60 FPS, and that's smoother. And then you notice these are getting bigger. 135 MBs with the 4K at 24, that's film style. And then the 170 MB with 4K at 30, that's higher resolution. And then the ultimate is the 400 MB. So 1 minute of video is 400 megabytes, 4K at 60 frames per second, excuse me. That's the higher resolution and smoother. Now, one thing I will tell you is I've been messing on the sheep hunt with videoing through my mainly through my spotting scope,
right,
with my phone scope, and started doing a lot of the 4K stuff. And I will tell you, one thing you have to watch is if you get much over a minute, those files get huge.
They get big.
And when you're trying to, something to do with when I was editing the videos, I don't quite have it figured out yet, where when you're trying to send them to people, they almost won't send. And then I noticed when I was loading some on Instagram would basically shut off because I think the file was so big. So I thought that was interesting that you've got to watch. I almost think these phones, if you were to show someone the image, it's unbelievably clear on the phone, but then trying to take that to social media or in a sharing capability, that's where I think you run into issues with the 4K.
I think, and really I'm going to, and Jay, you're headed down the road that we were going to go anyway, but I think what needs to be talked about, and the one word that question pertains to, and exactly what it pertains to on what you're doing, is distance. Because whether you're using your binocular or whether you're using your spotting scope, the distance is going to dictate everything that you're...
Absolutely.
Because
distance and light.
Exactly. Because if you're not paying attention to what we were, what you just brought out, and you're not, if I'm binocular range, I'd much rather go to binocular range because you're going to get so much better light. And if you're at that kind of a distance, I've taken pictures at 80 yards that people are like, man, that's like almost magazine quality stuff.
Right.
And then, you explain to them that that was through a binocular, with my, with my phone attached to it. And they're like, why? I can't even believe that's that good.
Right.
Well, I think it just, the farther distance you get away from that, I'm going to say binocular stuff. And I may be, if you're over 200 or 300 yards, I think it starts to diminish. Right. And I'm gonna say 300's like max.
The animal starts looking pretty small.
Yeah.
But if you've got a deer feeding or sheep or something at like 50 yards and you're filming through your 10s or your 15s, you can get some unreal clear quality stuff. But you get out there a little ways.
And to the point where you can change your settings pretty quick.
Right.
And you can go, hey, this is like perfect. I can get real high quality stuff right here. And while the file's going to be big and all that, but it may be worth it because some of the stills that you can pull out of it. And
I would say too, shoot like 20 and 30 second videos and start a new one.
Exactly.
Don't run them as long.
Exactly.
The other thing I think that's important with that is when you're phone scoping or using any sort of spotting scope, I think people want to do is they want to zoom in on their phone as far as it will go. What you want to do is use the magnification in the optic in the spotting scope. I get the best results on my 95, at like all the way over at the lowest power.
Yeah,
that's what gets the best image on that 30 power. But if the lighting condition is right, I can actually zoom in So don't zoom in on your phone. If you have a little bit of a black ring, you have to sometimes zoom in.
Yeah, you're going to take a little bit
to
of that
get
out.
rid of that.
Right.
But you want to zoom in on your phone as little as possible, and that will create a higher quality image. And use the zoom on your spotting scope, and you're going to get better images.
Absolutely.
Cody, we've got a bunch of questions here, and I think we're going to tackle the rest of them on another episode here.
Okay.
I want to thank you for coming on. GoHunt.com, Cody Nelson here, the glassing guru. He's the optics authority. GoHunt.com Gear Shop. You guys are a sponsor of my podcast, the title sponsor. You guys can call Cody directly for info and sales at 702-847-8747, extension 2.
I haven't hit one yet.
We're still
I'm
at
working
extension
my way
2.
up there.
And the email is optics@gohunt.com. I want to thank you guys for your sponsorship. Also, Kuiu.com, Kuiu.com. Kuiu makes the best ultralight hunting gear on the market today. Check them out. That's Kuiu, Kuiu.com. CanyonCoolers.com, based right out of Flagstaff, Arizona. Use the JScott promo code, and you're going to get a 10% discount on all orders. PhoneScope, what we were just talking about, PhoneScope.com. Use the JScott18 promo code to get a 10% discount on all orders. And then OnXMaps.com. If you use JScott18 promo code, you're going to get 20% off all orders. Cody, let's dive into some more questions on the next episode. I appreciate your time.
Will do. I appreciate you having me. It's always a good time. Thank you.